there's power in taking a photograph. There's power in being an artist.
It's the Phoenix Film Revival Podcast.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Film Revival Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathon Kohn, and today we have with us Stacy Kohn.
Hi, everybody.
And
Jonathon Kohn.
And Jonathan is a fellow that I met on Instagram. Not exactly sure how his advertisement popped up or whether it was an advertisement, but we connected through Instagram, and he offers something that's really unique to the community. It's a service where they archive film to prevent it from getting damaged. You send them your film, and they trim it, sleeve it, put it up on a shelf, and then send that back to you once you've filled up the binder. So something offered that the community doesn't usually get. So thank you for joining us, Jonathan.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah, thanks.
We have you from Alabama. Is that correct? That's where you're at?
That's right, Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay. Are you born and raised?
Born in Prattville, about 14 miles away, and then
Okay. Nice.
raised in Prattville and moved to Montgomery about a decade ago.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. And then do you like to go by John or Jonathan?
John.
John. You're a John? Okay. I like to call people what they like to be called. Or Barry. Like, you can just like whatever name works for you.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. You started this business, or how did you get into the Film Hound?
Yeah, so I'll spare you the very beginning of everything, but
We love the beginnings.
I started. I guess I'll just start at the beginning. I started out in high school playing football. Because that was going to be my avenue to go to college, hopefully. And then it turns out it was. Raised by a single mom, didn't have a lot of money, very humble beginnings, and was good enough to get a scholarship to go to college, and ended up going to the University of West Alabama on a football scholarship. And long story short with that, deep depression. First time ever away from home. I was a creative, but with this, there was no opportunity for that. It was just football, and I realized I hated football.
Yeah.
So deep depression turned into photography. And it started with a film camera that my mom brought home from a lost and found box at work. Started shooting about 2 or 3 years with CVS or Walgreens, 24 exposure. Just absolute crap, and decided to turn that into some income. Upgraded to I think it was a Canon 5D, the original, and started shooting weddings. And say maybe 6 years of that before I decided to go back to film. And it was right around that mark that I decided to join Indie Film Lab and started working there as a scanner. And then was instantly thrust into this film community that I had no clue existed. And it was through Indie Film Lab that I realized the need for an archival service. I was able to go out and shoot, 20, 30 rolls at a wedding, bring it back to the lab, free processing, got to scan all my own work. And at the end of the day, it was all wrapped up in this box or this tube. It was sleeved, continuous sleeving, and it was rolled up. And I'm the type of person that doesn't like to leave things incomplete. If I'm going to do something, I want to see it all the way through. And I'd seen, you get to see pictures of some of the masters' work, and you get to see the picture on Instagram. But then something popped up one day. I think it was... what is his name? Rodney? Let's see. Rodney Smith. I saw a post by the woman who handled his archives for 16 years. Her name is Patricia Barrett. And it was just this bookshelf full of binders. And I said, well, I want to do that to my work. It's not nearly as good as Rodney's, but I want to be able to hold on to everything I've ever shot. And I want it to be safe, and I want to be able to look through it, efficiently. It just made sense. Why have a continuous roll, 50 boxes in the closet? I want to have a binder that's cataloged, and, I can go through it and rescan if I need to, or easily see what's on the rolls. And so I did that for myself. And through doing that, I think it was about 200 rolls in, I realized that I could probably do this for a few other people who were maybe using the lab. I reached out and I started doing it, and now we're here,
Awesome.
Very cool. And it's one of those jobs that I think, everybody has the thing that they enjoy doing with photography and the thing that they don't enjoy doing with photography. And I know that sleeving part is like right up in there with like scanning for a lot of people, where they're like, ugh, that's the part. It's like the administrative part of it where you don't want to do it. It's like,
right.
There's nothing creative about sleeving.
Yeah.
No, totally. It's I can compare it with scanning. It's put your music or your podcast on, and it's mindless. You just do it. And with having kids recently, it's a very flexible job. There's very few people that immediately want their stuff back. So I've built the model to be sort of like a. Are you familiar with chat books? I don't know if they're still a company or not, but it was a company that would use the Instagram API to pull off the images that you post. And every 60 images, they would print a book and immediately send it to you.
Oh.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was just automatic.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I said, well, if a binder will hold about 100 pages, why not just have people who are continuously sending into the lab, 20, 30 roll orders, or even one roll orders? Why not just have them send it to the lab and let me archive it? And when a binder's full, boom, ship it back. And we'll call the shipping and the binder free. Try to price it in per roll so it's easy. It's just one static price, and it's worked so far. To go back to what you said earlier, I have no clue how you found me on Instagram, because I've put no effort into marketing at all.
I'm not exactly sure. It must have been either a hashtag, or I was, out snooping different things, and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is something different.
Yeah.
But we do have
Instagram's weird like that, and it'll refer you to gives you that list of, if you follow this person, maybe you should follow this person. It's so weirdly interconnected there, so you'll end up seeing like people that have 100,000 followers and people have like 5 followers.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you get like that real mix of it. Instagram's kind of fun like that. That algorithm or whatever it is does work against you a little bit when you're trying to do it, but in general, people still kind of see you out there.
Yeah, we offer workshops, and one of the things that we tell everybody that comes in is keep your negatives, and you need to retain it. Just because you're spending the money on the film, you're spending the money on developing it, whether it be at a lab or you home develop it. But there's these expenses, and then you either scan in the film or you make prints. And most people, I feel, are developing film for color, and it's not necessarily, I want to say a vast majority of the trendy photographers, or even just the non-knowledgeable photographers, are shooting to post on Instagram. And we have to remind them, keep your negatives, because it's important. You don't want to just throw these away. And a lot of people have gotten used to using Walgreens, and Walgreens you send in your film, they develop it, they throw the negatives away.
So sad.
They make your prints and stuff.
So sad.
It's something that's important to me, and I've always, I will say that I haven't been the best at keeping my negatives in the past organized or clean. I did actually have a binder that was put outside for a couple years, and it got weather damaged, and a lot of the stuff from high school, but the negatives are still in a okay shape. I can look at them and go, oh yeah, I remember high school.
That's awesome.
But but you know, it's important to retain your negatives, and I think the service that you guys are offering is definitely something that's important.
Yeah, you never know where you're going to go in the future. You may be, shooting film now and then put it away, if you're a younger person, and then you decide 20 years from now, you're like, hey, I want to, pick this back up, but you may want to get into it more seriously and go into a dark room. And if you don't have your negatives, what are you going to do with that? Or something happens on your computer. I mean, how many of us have had computers that have crashed and lost data? That just is tragic.
No,
that happened to
that's
all your photos.
Right. That's exactly right. It's I laugh at these the digital photographer influencers that have a RAID, if that's what you call it, 10 hard drives that are backing up every image 10 times, and then the film photographer who could care less about the negative. But to take a step back from all of that, the reason I have any interest in film at all is because I remember as a child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, some of my first memories were snooping through the TV stand while my mom was in another room and finding this box and this photo album. And I knew what pictures were back then. I could flip through and see relatives and, people who have long since passed. And then in the back of it, I found these brown little, I don't know what I thought they were, but they were just these little strips of brown material, and I could see through it, and I'd hold it up and I was like, holy crap, that's the image. And as a kid, that was literally magic for me.
Oh, absolutely.
To find the image and then go and find the actual print of it. That was magic. And then to think about my kids being able to see what I shot, at an age that they'll be soon, that to me, that just blows my mind. So I kind of romanticize it maybe a little more than most, but I think a lot of your serious film photographers, they care about their negatives to a point where they want to keep them around, and whether or not they have time to do so is another story. But
yeah,
I'm hoping that I can get everything in line with the Film Hound to offer a kind of a comprehensive service, but the bare minimum is protecting the negatives for me right now.
Yeah.
I'd like to eventually get into digitizing a contact sheet, doing a digital catalog of sorts. I know everybody, for the most part, and I'm coming from a lab where everyone gets their stuff scanned. So they have Lightroom catalogs full of these scans. And it's all in folders by the roll, so you don't necessarily have to have a digital contact sheet. But
True.
My main concern is making sure that your film is not rolled up for decades, creating a permanent bend, so that I just don't want people's negatives to be damaged. I get if it's a roll with your cat and you're just testing your plan. I totally get it. Maybe you don't need to archive that. Or if you do it yourself. It's very easy to do it yourself, but it is tedious and time consuming. But if it's something important, it seems like such a waste of money to do every step before that, the scanning, the buying the film, the processing it, the scanning, all those costs. And then at the very end to not have anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, that
blows my mind.
Yeah, the film was the whole point of it. And plus it's like a piece of like, whenever I hold, especially with like older film that I pick up, I'm like, this film was actually there as a part of this scene.
Yeah.
It's a piece of history right there because it was present. You can't say that necessarily about digital. It was like, okay, it went through the thing, but it was like, no, this physical thing caught this actual, like, it's catching photons like from like your dead grandma.
This thing
like,
was there at the moment. That it
like,
captures.
So that has a lot
of Polaroid or a negative. It's that Polaroids and negatives. They get me going.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yep.
So obviously you handle film pretty frequently, and so you see all sorts of film that comes through. As far as your process, there's a lot of people that ask what the best route would be as far as cleaning their own negatives. And I was curious if you had any recommendations to the average, photographer who does their own home processing, what you would recommend as far as, preventing
absolutely.
water spots or cleaning up dust and such.
So what we do is, you've got your lint-free glove, lint-free cloth. But if you've got a residue or an oil or something like that on your negative, you're going to want to use, I think Kodak recommends it's 95, either 90 or 95% isopropyl alcohol, because it'll clean everything off, but then it instantly evaporates. It doesn't damage the negative. And there's a chemical out there called PEC 12. It's kind of branded towards photographers, but it's about 5 times the price of isopropyl alcohol.
Oh yeah.
Is that the banana
So
stuff?
you could go.
Yeah, that's the stuff that smells like banana Laffy Taffy.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my
yes.
favorite, like, high, like chemical high, the markers at the gateway, but that stuff,
Yeah.
get a taste of that. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I use a, it's like a duster can, but instead of air, it's isopropyl alcohol. And it's very affordable on Amazon. I got like a 4-pack, I think. And yeah, like you said, it'll mess you up if you're not careful.
Yeah.
But you just a light little spray on the cloth and then run that negative between the cloth.
Yeah.
Between your fingers, and it cleans it right up. Maybe a couple passes, but
Okay.
that's actually one of the things I was thinking about today. I don't have any, before and after pictures of like a dirty negative and a clean negative on the website. These are the things I need to do to get the point across, along with some other things, but
Yeah, absolutely. Well, clean negatives are important, and whenever you can, obviously you want to use your preventative to not have to clean the negative too much. So we encourage people to, if they're home processing, you can use distilled chemicals or distilled water in with your chemicals, and then obviously use your photo flow at the end of that process to help prevent that spotting from happening. But yeah, we use the alcohol in the lab, so
Yep.
I'm glad we're not doing something too far off from what everyone else is doing.
I took too many times opening that banana stuff, just smelling it. What are you doing? Smelling
It's
bananas.
amazing how pricey that is. I work at a large format print company, and we use that for some applications. And I think we recently ordered a 16-ounce can. It was like some ungodly amount of money, $100 and something, $150, $175 for this little can. But that stuff is some good stuff.
It certainly is. It's effective for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the alcohol is like what, like $1, not even, like for
And does
big
it
bottle.
does
Yeah.
pretty
and it
decent
lasts
job.
like forever.
So so obviously people, the process for you would be to send the negatives into you, and then you handle it from there. You place them into sleeves, and then at some point the negative, I guess, binder gets sent back to the client.
Yeah. So if you're sending from home, and all this of course is on the website, but if you're sending from home, you want to make sure that you've got the rolls in usually a gallon Ziploc bag will work really well. You want to put it in a box, not an envelope. And you would organize it however you want me to carry over. So if there's just for an example, if I've got 5 orders from my lab, usually those negatives have order forms attached to them. Just send all that in. If they're in boxes, if they're in bags, whatever, send it in, and I'll keep it all, together. And then by order number, I'll send it back to you. But it's basically, once I get it, I hang them up. This helps if they've been stored for a long time. This helps them straighten out, because it is a nightmare to try to. I've had what's his name, Baba Agba, an African photographer. He had about 500 rolls stored for almost a decade and sent them, and they literally like a slinky.
Yeah.
And it took forever to archive those, but the straighter the better. So I immediately hang them up and let gravity start working, and then in that meantime, I've sent an invoice letting you know what your account balance is, and once that's paid, I can start archiving it. And then before I put it in a binder, I put them in a folder in the filing cabinet. and I have multiple filing cabinets all organized alphabetically, but it's once I see that a client has hit that 100-page mark, that's when I can go ahead and prepare the binder and then send that out. But I like to I'm very process driven to a fault. Once they hit that 100 mark, then I send out emails. Hey, just making sure this is your address. Don't want to send it to anybody else.
Right.
Yeah. Seriously.
Get that back, and knock on wood, haven't had any issues, haven't lost any negatives, no shipping errors, nothing of that nature in the past, since 2017. Okay. So very fortunate there. But this year was the first year I had what do you call it? Sorry, it's getting late here.
No worries.
When you think something bad happened, but it didn't really. It wasn't a hiccup. It was just a false alarm. That's
Gotcha.
what it was. And a false alarm recently, and it literally almost drove me to quitting, to just shutting it down and saying,
Oh, man.
I'm sending everybody, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
If I'm losing one roll, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So I'm very is that type A or OCD about it? It's to the point where I would like to scale up the business and hand it off to somebody else to manage.
Yeah.
And I can't do it.
Can't do it. It's a tricky spot to be in. I've handled film before. For a while, I was hand processing, which was a nightmare. Mm-hmm. Let alone the archiving end of things, because I could not just, toss people's negatives after I scanned it. But the whole process from beginning to end, it's you have to have the love for film and the passion, but you also have to have the patience. And obviously, being an A-type is important in this process. And a lot of respect to you for that. And you're using it for something good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And underappreciated, archiving negatives. I mean, if there's something that I feel is like an underdog, it's taking care of your work after you've done all of that to get to that point. So
It's overlooked, I think. Have you gotten any work that you've been like, oh, I can't do anything with this? Like someone sending you something thinking that you can, like if you had to reject anything that's been sent to you at this point, like you got something and it was like a shredded, and they're like, oh no.
No. What I do with that, I'm trying to think. The dirtiest negatives I ever got were voluntary. Like I had said, hey, please let me do this. They didn't know I was archiving film at the time, but the Fitzgerald Museum here in town, they have negatives of the original house that the Fitzgeralds lived in, with pictures of the Fitzgeralds. And they were like, hey, they knew that I was a film photographer. So they said, hey, check these out. Aren't these cool? And I looked at them. I was like, these are awesome, but they're filthy. Like these are dirty. But they were in sleeves in an envelope, in the dark, which is good. But they were filthy. And I took them, cleaned them up. The cleaning part's very easy. I'm trying to think. I have not gotten any negatives that were so old. I'm trying to think. Back when I was scanning at the lab, I scanned a couple rolls from World War II, from Pearl Harbor. It was the day that they were bombed. It's on Indie Film Lab's Instagram feed.
Yeah, I think I saw those photos. Yeah, I was looking on Instagram. Yeah. Very fun. And they look
It's like
really good.
3 or 4 black and white images.
Yeah.
And we scanned them, and they look amazing.
They look good.
But the actual negative, if you turn it over and you look at the emulsion, you can see the silver. It's reflecting back at you.
right.
And then it's also flaking off. Which is, I guess that just happens if they're not kept properly. But as far as cleaning goes, the cleaning is the easy part. If I get something that's been, messed up in processing, or maybe you stripped it out in the camera or something like that, I still put those in the sleeve, so you still have them. And I don't know about taping film and scanning. We never had to do that.
Yeah.
When I was a scanner, but I'm sure you could. I'm sure there's a tape that lends itself to scanning.
Right.
And then you accept all sizes of film. There's no film format.
Actually, it's been 35, 120, 220, all formats in between. And then just recently with the app stuff that I'm doing right now, I've included slide, like individual, and then 4x5, 5.7, and 8.10.
Okay.
Now, if anything, the large formats are the easiest to do.
Yeah.
4 per page or 1 per page. So
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be getting any of that. I've got quite a few 4x5s, and I've only ever had one client send slides. But the bread and butter is 35 and 120 for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. More tedious to, put those together for sure.
Have you ever handled any?
If you're shooting 8x10, you're taking care of it.
Yeah, when you get
You're
into that
not
level,
throwing
yeah,
it.
in general, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say, have you handled any 8x10?
Not through Film Hound. I've worked with other 8x10 photographers and 10 type photographers, stuff of that nature. So I've gotten to hold it and look at it and use it, but I've never gotten to archive anything.
That's massive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a single shot. Put it into the frame or into the sleeve. Put it on. Do it yourself. But obviously, you guys are doing an archiving service.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about you and your work. So I've seen, you have some work that's up. You have a website and everything. So tell us a little bit more about like where you are with your own personal photography. I'm assuming it's all archived incredibly well. It's in a big pile in a box.
It is. It's I ended up getting too busy with everyone else's film. Mine's just sitting in the closet. No, it's on hold. And I'm very confident I'll get back to it one day. But growing up my dad was around, but it was like a every other weekend thing, where I'd get to see him, and then he passed away years ago. And so the gap that my children are filling now was photography before they came along. And so it kind of it's definitely taken a back seat. I would like to say that I've not lost my anticipation. And I know nobody knows who I am on here, but I do like documentary stuff. I'm a fly on the wall. I try not to interact with the subject at all. But I was mainly doing weddings and families. And so that it was very difficult, especially here in the South. It's very direction oriented. It's almost like nobody knows how to get married unless a photographer's there.
And telling them what to do. It's interesting because I was looking at a lot of your photos, and then you would put in, the hashtags and then I wouldn't know it was from a wedding until after I read the hashtags. And I was like, where was this taken? And this is an interesting shot. And like, how did you get these like conversations? You could see people like interacting with each other. And a lot of them I didn't even know they were photography related to weddings, which was kind of interesting because it's like, that's the stuff that's like really interesting to see that. So it's interesting you saying Alabama's kind of on that formulaic, okay, let's get one with grandpa and let's go. So to kind of buck that trend is probably difficult. Did you have a hard time? Because it looks like you excelled at doing the fly on the wall and, taking these candids. Was that difficult for you creatively to be doing weddings and having people expect you to do the opposite of what you naturally were doing?
In the best way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I think I could only count on one hand the clients that knew what they were going to get. And I would say 80% were pleasantly surprised. They didn't know they wanted it after they got the images. And then 10% were upset. They wanted the direction, they wanted the posed, they wanted everything the way that it is down here. And then the 3 or 4 clients that knew exactly what they were getting made everything else worth it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a constant uphill battle. Thank goodness I don't have to do it for income anymore. But Yeah, like I said, and this is I could literally talk about this all day because it's a box that I have not unpacked yet, and to be able to bounce ideas off of somebody that's also passionate about photography is priceless. But and we could probably do this right now because I've already lost track of what the question was. Like in my mind just went over here and over here.
No, it's okay.
Was it a struggle?
Yeah, to go to
Is that what it was?
Yeah, so a struggle to shoot people in a way that you're not naturally inclined to shoot, because it seems like your natural inclination in shooting people is to be the observer, not to be the person putting people direction. People.
Getting to just float around the weddings was definitely the easiest part. The moment I started sweating was the moment everyone lined up for pictures. All eyes on the photographer, get this done, all that kind of stuff. The having to take the bride and groom out for their little moment together before everything started. All of that. If the subject wasn't doing what they would be doing if I wasn't there, I was sweating.
Yeah,
basically.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But everything else, it's so easy to just capture life as it happens.
Yeah.
I gravitated towards that immediately. And I think at the end of the day, when I look back on it, a lot of what I was taking was what I wanted in my personal life. And I think it took a while to realize that. Took having kids to realize that. Took getting married to realize that. But as soon as marriage and kids came along, I don't miss the weddings. I miss what happens at the weddings. Mm-hmm. But I love having my weekends.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
Those weekends, they get taken away.
Yeah. What are weekends?
Yeah. So that being said, you've gotten married. Did you have a photographer or like? And I'm asking this out of relation to. So obviously we're both into film and we're all both into photography quite a bit, and we're married. Mm-hmm. And you would think that photographers would have cameras. We didn't have a single camera. We were fully expecting to not have photos. We had a friend that showed up for our wedding, which was funny, but it's kind of the opposite of that. So I'm curious to see like where you went in your own life for photography at your wedding.
Yeah. It was, I'll tell you this, before getting married, it was a done deal in my mind. I was going to have multiple film photographers there. I was going to find a way to get at least 3 really good ones. All 3 different types. Somebody who's really good with post stuff, somebody who's documentary, the whole 9 yards. And the moment it started happening, it immediately switched to who are we most comfortable with. And I hate to say this, I didn't care about the pictures. As much as I thought I would.
Yeah.
It was, I cared about being as present as possible so that I could try to remember those moments. And yeah, that's the whole point of having a photographer there. Mm-hmm. But we went with who we were most comfortable with, which also I worked with at the lab. Jackie and Luke, Lucas, they were, Jackie worked at the lab. She was the manager, and we all got along really great. And my wife Mallory was very comfortable, and same here. And I, my best man was Josh Motes, who owns Indie Film Lab, and I would say if it weren't for him being my best man, I would have wanted him to shoot it, but not enough to miss that opportunity of him getting to be my best man. But I was able to get Ryan Muirhead. I don't know if you know.
Oh yeah, Ryan.
Ryan.
Yeah, I've seen his
I was
work.
able to get him to come down, and he shot a roll or two there, so he got a few shots of us. But
awesome.
Yeah,
I'm glad you got to quote unquote retire from wedding photography. So if, later on down the road, maybe after the kids are a little older and stuff, and you see yourself getting back into photography, and what form do you think that will take once you get back? Because it sounds like weddings maybe aren't the way it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, I would love to do weddings, and I would love to do them totally free of charge. I would like to position myself in a way that I don't have to make money doing it, and therefore I have total freedom and don't have to feel any guilt about not doing something that they wanted me to do. I would be more like an additional photographer. They would get who would they want, and then I would just weasel my way in there and get some really good stuff, and they could buy a print if they wanted it.
Yeah.
But what I've been given a lot of thought to lately is I was driving into work about a month ago, and I saw these two older women pulled over on the side of the interstate changing a tire first thing in the morning. And then down here, it's really hot right now. And they were just sweating. And I was, I guess I was kind of marrying that with the whole Humans of New York thing, where maybe it's project based, maybe it's I find somebody in a situation where they need help that maybe I can do something more efficient than they can. Not to say that they couldn't change a tire. They changed it. I'm sure they were totally fine. But maybe I could save them some time. And with that saved time, take 1 or 2 pictures and try. And so the test would be for me to do my best work in less than 5 minutes. And then document the whole process of helping them with that final image at the very end. So it's like one for you, one for me type of thing. And maybe it's a social project that can kind of spread and other people can help out with that. But, I thought about calling it The Help or something along those lines. But I've got a big, long document typed up with the parameters to make it work. And I don't want to have to go out looking to help somebody. I just want to go about my day, and if I see somebody in need, help any way I can, and then, in return, I get to take a picture or 2.
Yeah, being able
and try to do something like that, but I don't want it to be a snapshot. I want it to be evocative. I want it to make people stop and look, but at the same time, it's that goes against the whole asking permission thing and interacting with the subject beforehand. So it's for me, it's up in the air right now. I'd rather just walk up and down the street and capture people. But again, here in Alabama, that's very hard.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. We're obviously here in the Southwest, and I've been, I lived in the Northeast for a long time, but only visiting, parts of the South, and certainly not Alabama. And I'm so curious what the difference is as far as like street photography down there versus other places where, you're in New York City, you can just snap away and you're really not going to have an issue. Yeah. But down there, you're going to get some guff, like from people, like if you're just randomly.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, the sheer volume in New York, I've shot street in New York and New Orleans, and compared to doing it in Alabama, it's a breeze. Most people could care less. They're numb to it. It's easy in those larger areas. I would like to see some of your street photographers, some of your well-known street photographers do it in a place that's not so easy and see what they can create, see what they can get. But there's not a lot happening on the street. There's we've got people going to work or homeless, but there's not really any. It's a test to find opportunities that work. That would create a good image. That's not not something that's posed or thought about beforehand.
I suspect there's a lot of stuff in Alabama that a lot of people from other parts of the country would like to see. I always have to remind myself of that here, because a lot of photographers here avoid taking photos. I mean, there's obviously people that do a lot of it, but avoid taking things like desert photography and the saguaro cactuses, things like that. And then I have to remind myself, no one else in the country and other parts of the world are seeing these things and sort of take them for granted. Sometimes when you live somewhere, especially if you live somewhere for a long time, you take for granted the things that are around you that you think are completely boring. But if you took like, you went out and did your day and took pictures of like, you know, your grocery store and like, you know, your shops that you go to and people like just driving in cars, I suspect it would be incredibly fascinating to someone that didn't live there. So it's always interesting to hear what people find interesting versus maybe not interesting as far as subject for what they would be taking a photo of. Yeah.
Speaking of that, last night, you know Dave Burnett, the large format Olympic photographer. David Burnett. Yeah, he's he shoots the Aero Ektar 4x5 at the Olympics.
No, I'll have to check.
Yeah,
them out.
look him up.
Yeah,
he posted a picture from the 50s where he was in Spain. This was just a picture from his day in Spain, and it was the running of the bulls, and just I can just imagine back in the 50s. There's no phones. Everyone's looking at the bulls. There's no phones up pointing at the bulls, but it's packed, it's loaded, and it's just a snapshot. But in today's world, you look back on that and it looks like a masterpiece. It looks like the perfect shot. It looked like something that Henri Cartier would take.
Yeah.
But it was just a snapshot. And it was just from his day in Spain. He wasn't, doing anything out of the norm. Yeah. And because it's so many years after that, it is fascinating to look at. And yeah, the pictures of the malls. Have you seen those series?
Those are amazing. It makes me like want to go back to the 80s and take all the photos of like the mall. I worked in the mall. Like I'm like, why? I wish I had a camera back then. I was taking photos and I like totally took it all for granted. Like because you think it's just a mall. I'm working at the mall. Like there's nothing here. But going back, oh my gosh, if I could have taken photos, like that would have been so great. And
Stacy actually got a feature for one of the malls here. Obviously it was closing as most malls are. But she got shots of
the Metro Center, which was a very popular mall in the Phoenix area. And unfortunately, I don't even think was around all that long really before its demise, but most malls have kind of gone down the drain. A lot of movies were filmed there.
Okay.
What was it? Bill and Ted. It's Excellent Adventure. That was all filmed here in Arizona and Tempe. And that mall was like the mall that all the characters went to in the mall. So it had a kind of a storied history. But the mall obviously was closing, and I took a whole bunch of photos of the mall kind of in its, current state, it was still open, but it was like on its very, very, very last leg. So there was a few businesses were open, but I was like, it's going to be gone. It's going to be gone. And it is now. They're in the process of actually tearing it down. So it's like that stuff that like, I always figure photography is fleeting. It's like you're taking a picture that you think maybe this is boring, but in a year from now, 2 years from now, it's not going to exist anymore. The only thing that caught that was your photo. And then going back to like the malls, there's not that many photos of it because no one was like, oh, this is just boring, mundane, normal, everyday stuff.
Right.
In reality. So it's interesting how time and distance really brings out photography. So it's almost like you have to have this long span where you can look back at your stuff and be like, oh, wow.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. It's when I was really gung ho with photography, maybe 6-7 years ago, I was maybe peaked at that moment, and I was out shooting almost every day. And I was looking back a few days ago at some of those pictures, and the way that Montgomery has changed since then has blown my mind. But like you said, the mundane, taking pictures of that, you can't go wrong taking pictures of the most mundane thing in your day, because in 30-40 years, it's going to be something special. The same way if you took a screenshot of your Amazon app, just open up Amazon, take a screenshot of it. In 50 years, that's going to be impressive.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, whoa. They had phones back then. It's wild.
Yeah, the world changes very, very quickly, and it seems like it's changed even quicker. Like every year, it seems like something's new and crazy in the world. So what... in that part of the world, what are people shooting mostly, do you think? Like, what's the community of photographers like in Alabama? Do you have a good read on kind of what that looks like?
In Montgomery, it's very slim pickings. I would say almost every film photographer is at Indie Film Lab.
Oh, really? Okay.
and if they aren't, they are have just left Indie Film Lab, or they're about to go to Indie Film Lab to work. It's very tempting. It's a great place to be because of the community, but there is a community in Birmingham, just north of us, that do film walks and things of that nature. I haven't been up there or spoke with them in quite a while, but I follow them on Instagram, and they do, I think weekly, they go for walks and do stuff like that. But yeah, it's we could say it's lacking. I would say it could definitely use a little more. What's the word?
Community in the community.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of turnover. It feels like, film is. I mean, it's for the past decade. It's been growing in popularity, of course, but like you said, it's a lot of. I want to take a picture with this camera so that I can say I shoot film, or I want to post this picture on Instagram and then not care about it. But it's mostly, I think it's mostly a lot of friends hanging out, taking pictures of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's I don't know of a lot of film photographers in this area that are doing anything commercially with film. Outside of weddings. I think A. Bryan out of Birmingham, I think he's still shooting. I don't know. But he's apparently a really big deal. Stephen DeVries was shooting film for quite a while, but he went all digital. But it's mostly Birmingham, I would say, is your hub for your bigger commercial artists.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're shooting film.
Sounds like there's some opportunity there. So somebody's looking to relocate and you're a film photographer. It sounds like there might be some openings for some stuff down there. Because some parts of the world, like it's interesting. Phoenix is like, there's a pretty fair amount, I'd say, of film shooters here, but they're pretty spread out and mostly kind of have their own little kind of groups. And then if you go to New York, they have gatherings there. Like I went to the Great Film Gathering, which was not this last one, the one before that. I was in New York for it, and it was just hundreds and hundreds of people. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this community is like huge here. I mean, it kind of lines up with the population, but at the same time, it's interesting. Every community and every town and city, like kind of how they have how their community operates as far as like events and things like that, and how people kind of come together as a whole. So I think a really big important thing is other photographers and creatives being able to shoot ideas and talk to each other. Because when you're living in like a little bubble, you get stuck, I think, a lot of the time. And it's like just nice, I think, just to be able to interact with other people.
Yeah. I know we got to, when I was scanning, we got to go to the workshops, the big workshops. And there was one in New York, and there was a couple out in California, Las Vegas. WPPI, there was a big gathering around all of that, and that's where I got to meet a lot of the I guess more well-known film photographers, your Yan, your Ryan Muirhead, your they had a show on it, Film Shooters, Tanya Lippert, I think was her name. It seemed like that I got introduced to this bubble of I don't want to call them hipsters, but back then it was, everyone would call them hipsters, but it was this tight-knit group of really, cool people who were not just hanging out shooting film, but pushing each other.
Yeah.
And it seems like Yan and Ryan have a really tight relationship, and they constantly push each other and, share things on social media and do workshops and stuff together. But I think we could all benefit from finding our competition, or not that we're against somebody else, but somebody who's going to push us to get better and better.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine if I were, say, high school age and friends with another high schooler, and all we did was just hang out on the weekends and just shoot random stuff and not learn anything from it, or not try to find out why we're shooting or anything like that. I'm such a ask why constantly and refine and get to the source of why I'm doing something. And I mean, starting off, it was just to have something to do, so I didn't feel like I was sitting there wasting my life away. And then through doing that, I was able to get into something that I found a little meaning in. But that's what's so cool about not only film, but just the photography community in general. It's so nice to find somebody that's got an opinion on the craft and kind of theories behind why or why not to do certain things, instead of just talking gear or business. Absolutely hate talking business, but sorry, I'm rambling there.
No, that's okay. And unfortunately, a lot of the communication a lot of people get, that's the way it's framed, because it's going through, social media, and this stuff on social media obviously is put there for not necessarily just blowing off and talking in general. It usually has some sort of purpose behind it. And a lot of that purpose usually is self-promotion or, for profit. And so it sort of ends up being it's a very different experience to see somebody in person and talk about it and be able to bounce off. That's really evident if you've ever gone on a photo walk with people. Most people don't even go to take photos on a photo walk. They're going to talk to other photographers because they don't get a chance to do that, because a lot of them are out there in the middle of the night shooting all by themselves, constantly. And oh, there's other people doing this. And it makes them feel I feel like a lot of people come from stuff like that, these events, re-energized to go back out there and be like, yeah, you know what?
Do y'all prefer shooting or walking and shooting with other people, or do you prefer being alone?
I would say that we pretty much go and do our own thing and shoot, and we'll go and shoot together. We'll take a trip down to Globe, which is a really small town in southern Arizona, or go up to Flagstaff or anywhere, go to California, New York. But as far as when we shoot together, it's pretty much we're kind of off doing our own little thing, but having fun exploring. As far as in town with other people, we do workshops for intro to film, and occasionally I'll shoot in that class, and so will Stacy. And it's an interesting. You could either be involved with a group or not, but I don't know. It's
interesting. Those photo walks are interesting for us because we often we have those workshops, give or take, every 2 weeks. And we have up to 8 people that are in those workshops. And then we'll go kind of take the same loop on the area that's outside of our lab on Grand Avenue. And when I do shoot, I kind of half off, half don't, because I'm still helping people on the walk. So I'm not necessarily paying attention to that. But when I do shoot on the walk, I'm trying to take photos of, I'm playing let's find the new thing on Grand Avenue that I haven't seen, because I've seen Grand Avenue 10 million times, and we've seen so many photos from Grand Avenue, which is interesting. But it's also an interesting view because we get to see, we develop the photos from that workshop, and we get to see the photos that were taken on the workshop. So it's always interesting what catches the eye of the people that are with us, because on occasion you'll get someone that takes a photo and you'll be like, oh, it's interesting they chose that, because you would be on that block and that something that 90% of the people were taking a picture of this one thing on the block, and this other person focused on this other thing on the block instead. So it's kind of fascinating from that point of view. And then unfortunately, I don't think we get enough time to go shooting as much as we'd like to. The weather hurts us a little bit too, because we're up to, I think, 117 right now. Yeah. So we're hiding out inside, and the humidity's a little high too. But once the weather gets better, we like to go out and get a little bit more shooting done. I think we're both not really street photographers, so I think that's part of when we go visiting places, it's a little difficult for us because we're not necessarily street people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, most of my photography is really portrait work. I'm super technical, and my creativity comes from the excess of being technical with stuff. If in a sense. So for me to do candid, it's a different mindset. And as far as doing street photography, it's a bit of a challenge. So obviously there's fun stuff to shoot when you go into a town that's, kind of falling apart, like a lot of these mining towns that we have here. There's, plenty of things to photograph in those towns, which I guess it's kind of a little bit of an exercise for us to do that. But street photography is it's I don't know, it's an interesting
It can be difficult.
subject.
It can be difficult, especially if it's not street, like, just buildings, cars. When you want to go for the people on the street, that turns into a completely different thing. And our challenge is we're very populated here in Phoenix, but because of the heat, we're not a walking town. We are definitely a car city. So to find groups of people that are out about walking around can actually be kind of a difficult thing to do here in Phoenix, even though we're so populated, just because everybody's like stuck behind their automobile or inside in the air conditioning.
Right.
So for a film photographer outside, it takes on a whole different, you have these sweet spots and you almost want to do it at events because there's a lot of people in an event, but at the
like
same
a
time-
wedding.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So you got to
Where people want their picture taken because they're all dressed up.
yeah,
Right,
they're kind
right.
of willing to do that. So it's always nice to be able to bring a camera along with like an event where there's going to be a lot of people and be able to just kind of sneak in photos that aren't necessarily event related, but like, oh, I finally got some people together. Maybe I can get some photos of some folks. Yeah, the street's really interesting, but I would love to travel more. The South seems so fascinating to me. I feel like there's a lot of stuff down there that is probably very different in comparison to places that maybe like I know I have seen just from photos and things like that. So I'm so fascinated to I'd like to travel down there at some point and see what's down there photography wise. I bet you guys have some cool stuff.
Yeah, if you ever do come down this way, Montgomery's mostly it's pretty typical. There's nothing really noteworthy photography wise. It's probably the same type of people you would see anywhere. You're probably going to get some good stuff down around the coast, Mobile, Apalachicola, somewhere down around there. Boating communities.
It's called Apalachicola. Is that what I heard?
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
that. I'm from
It's like it.
I'm from
It basically
Appalachia,
it
so-
looks like
but I like that name.
what is it? Forrest Gump. Where they're on the
Okay.
boat. It's a lot of that down there.
Is that the name of the town? Appalachia?
Yeah, Apalachicola.
Okay, I officially love that. That's a really
Yeah.
great name.
I've heard Montgomery and Birmingham, but never heard that part.
I've never heard of that
Yeah,
town.
yeah.
No, I've definitely not. No,
Yeah.
that sounds fascinating.
What about Gordon Parks? Familiar with him?
Yeah.
Old photographer down in the South.
Sounds familiar, but not enough to.
If you want to get a
recall.
taste of Alabama,
check out Gordon
think-
Park stuff.
Gordon Parks.
50s and 60s, 70s, segregation, integration, all of that. His work, I would say now he's top of my list now for most admirable. I love looking at his stuff because it was mundane, run-of-the-mill stuff, a lot of poverty, things of that nature. Just rural families here in Alabama, just trying to make it, that kind of stuff, farming families.
Gotcha.
It's mostly, I think it's all medium and large format for the most part, but it's a great, just anything that he shoots is great.
Oh, nice. I'll have to check that out. Gordon Parks.
Kind of like Alabama's own Robert Frank. If Robert Frank just spent all his time here, kind of like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. So we have a section of our podcast that we ask our listeners to ask questions of our guests. So we did get a question for you. And then Dan, what's the username there?
Yeah, it's going to be coming from Small Not All Photography.
Good name.
And they asked, what's the process? How do we get started using Film Hound? And what can we expect? So we did kind of go over that, but we can kind of summarize again. If I'm a new person wanting to use the services that you guys offer, what's going to be our process there?
Sure. So let's say I would say, anybody who's sending in film to a lab, you can, instead of having them return it to your address, you can have them return it to ours. Or if you're not a high volume shooter, see if your lab will put everything together for you and maybe send 1 box a month or 1 box a quarter over to us. But just use the return address field of your order form if you're using the lab to communicate with your lab and let them know to hold all your stuff and then send it in bulk. If you're sending from home, you just send it to our address. Make sure your name and email, and then anything else from there. If you want, you can send that, phone number, things of that nature. But once we get your film, that's where we go through it. We unroll it, hang it up. We label it if we need to. If it doesn't have an order form, we assign an order number to it and then enter it into our system. And then you get an email letting you know that your account balance is X amount and instructions on how to pay that. And then once it's paid, it's archived and you have access to your account on the app. That's a whole nother podcast. I'm developing apps now because of the app that I had to make for this business. I got really good at making apps, so now I develop apps. And I've spent the past few months upgrading the Film Hound app to something that would make it super easy for the clients. So you no longer have to interact with the app if you don't want to. You'll get an email with a link to Stripe and an amount that you owe, and you can just click pay, and you can do the whole Apple Pay thing and all that kind of stuff. But it's an account balance system now instead of paying per order. So if you've got 5 orders with us, you're not going to get 5 emails and have to pay 5 times. You're just going to pay once for all 5 orders.
Right.
So it helps both sides out quite a bit. And it took a while to get to that point. A little too long maybe. But from that point, once your stuff is archived, you can either request it back manually, and that's when you can include an archival binder if you want it. If not, we'll just send it back. We'll do the Ziploc bag, make sure that it's airtight, waterproof, all that stuff, and send that back to you, or we'll do it in a binder. Or you can just have us hold it. There's no charge to hold it up to 100 pages, and that's when we'll send it back automatically. And then we also have a setting where we had a client who just had a baby, and she had 400 rolls, all in boxes.
Oh, wow.
Stacked as high as she was and twice as wide in her house. And she had to make room for the baby. So she sent it all to me, and it's all sitting in a binder right now. And she doesn't want it back yet because they're moving. I think they're moving to the Pacific Northwest from DC. Yeah, they're in DC. They're moving Pacific Northwest. And I'm sure she'll request it back after that. But I'm holding it, until she wants it back. So it's...
That's nice. You probably opened
I guess at the end of the day, just reach out. I'm John. You can literally send me a message anytime about anything. I give out my real phone number. So if anybody wants to call, you can feel free to call and ask a question anytime. I'm still learning because I don't know anybody else doing this. So I'm kind of having to make it up as I go. And I'm looking for feedback everywhere. So I hope that makes sense. Send it to us.
Yeah.
We send you an amount that you owe, and then we either hold on to it or we send it back to you depending on what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's like a service that at first thought, you're like, why would anyone need that? But then when you really start thinking about it, like, oh, no, there's people that have been collecting these negatives for years, and they're just sitting on them, or someone that's inherited negatives or important negatives for an organization. There's actually a lot of need for this kind of service. Yeah. So it's really nice to see someone find a little, in this day, you're like, well, where, everyone's doing like the thing, like, and there's a lot of people doing it, but to find something that no one else was doing and you found it, and like, that's really great. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
So what are all your socials, and for the business and personal, if you want to put those out there?
So Film Hound, just plain and simple, Film Hound seems to have been taken. I don't even know what the company does, but it's film related. It's cinema related, but it's usually across all social media. It's The Film Hound, but the website is thefilmhound.com. Instagram is the same, the Film Hound. Let me alt tab over here. The website basically has everything. I have a newsletter that I'm stretched so thin there's no news. And then let's see. Yes, it's basically at this moment a very inactive but monitored Instagram. So
Okay.
if a stranger wants to reach out, they can do so through the website, contact form on the website, or through Instagram. And then, I'll be able to answer any questions from there. But like I said, I have put no money and no effort into marketing at this point. It's totally organic, word of mouth, and mostly with the help of Indie Film Lab and Northeast Photographic. Those are the two labs I've been able to partner with, and I'm hoping to partner with a few others where they make it easy enough to just click Film Hound as a return option on their websites, their order forms, and that's a nice introduction to their clients for us. But it lets them know to for those labs to send it to me and send it back to them. But trying to devise a way that I can take what a lab is already doing. Like, I think the Find Lab already has their in-house archival process, but I've gotten quite a few orders from the Find Lab's archived film, and it's not in a page and a binder. It's one of those wax sleeves where all of them are in there, so they're all touching each other and they can move around freely. And you can't hold it up and see what's in there. You have to take it out and then touch them with your bare hands.
Right.
So it's not. I want to find a way to say, hey guys, send me all the stuff that you're doing. You'll get incentive. I got to find an incentive for them, and then a reduced price for your client for doing so. So I want to make it a win-win.
Yeah.
And then I could have a full-time job as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got to show someone digging out the old, go to your parents and you go find that box that's got all the envelopes and it's got like all your photos, and pull out the
I was
wad
gonna
of
say,
negatives and be like, this
was
is
it?
what you need to.
Jose Villa. I'm sure you've heard Jose Villa's name.
I haven't. I'm not.
We're bad with names.
Yeah.
We're really bad with names.
Okay.
This is the whole podcast
Jose
is to
Villa
connect with
is
people.
like, no, that's wonderful.
forget
So
everyone's name.
I think he, I don't know that he shoots film anymore, especially not at weddings, but Jose Villa and his husband, Joel Serrato, for a long time, they used Richards in California. Richards Photo Lab.
I've heard it before multiple times. I don't remember if it's Utah or California. I think it's California.
Utah was Find Lab, and they
Yeah.
moved to Hawaii. Yeah. Okay. So Richards, they use Richards, and there was a video. I don't know if it's still up or not, but there was a video years ago of Jose going into his storage unit to find a wedding. I think somebody wanted some scans, some rescanned or something blown up, and he had 50 of those long thin tubs you put under your bed.
Oh yeah.
He had 50 of those in the storage unit. And after he opened that up, each end of it was all the same thing. It was the single wax sleeve of all the negatives from one roll inside of it.
Oh man.
And it gave me a heart attack. But I don't know where we were, but that places like Richards or the Fine Lab or
Yeah.
whatever, there should be, and I would love to do this for them, but I wish that labs like that would follow through with an entire page and a binder, or at least just a page, something that you can hold up and you can see the entire roll.
Yeah.
The whole roll's protected, nothing's touching, stuff like that. But there's a lot of opportunity for it, and I guess I'm just I'm trying to get all my ducks in a row before I fully dive in and try to market or sell this service as a necessity.
Well, I definitely think it's something that's important, and I think the community absolutely needs it. And the nice thing about it is for the most part, everything's done with the film. So once you get your digital scans from the lab, you don't need to worry too much about the negatives. You're not in a rush to get them back.
Mm-hmm.
So the nice thing is it can kind of get batched together, shipped to you, handled, and then, you know, archived. And so the beauty with this is that there is some additional time there rather than having to rush it and then having to incur all these extra costs and then try to balance out that and still make a profit and not pass those costs off to the photographer.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but I'm excited for you. I think it's an excellent service.
And I think it's a really good reminder to people, like, oh, yeah, maybe I should treat my negatives better.
Yeah.
they count just as much as the photo itself counts. I mean, you're nothing without your film. I mean, that's the whole point of all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you're I hate to say it, but what happens if your house burns down and your computer is gone, and so are your negatives? So, you know, at least there's the redundancy of having it both stored in the cloud, on your computer, on a hard drive, and then also, you know, maintaining the negatives, but having it stored somewhere else where it's at least protected.
And knowing where all your negatives are in one place. So when you're grabbing like your important stuff that, like, you know, you grab your 2 or 3 things when that fire happens, you got that one binder you only have to grab. You don't feel like, oh no.
Right. Right.
It's in one place. It's right there with your camera, you know?
Yeah. But awesome. Well, I can't think of anything else. Do you have?
Yeah, no, it was wonderful having you on and get a little better look at like what the business is and how it works. You know, and just kind of showing us like how incredibly valuable it is. Because like I said before, on the surface, you're like, wait, what? And like, but then you listen to it, you're like, it makes complete sense. So it's really nice to hear someone being able to do that and bring that to people, because it definitely is a need out there for sure. Yeah, we definitely want to see where you go with the business and keep us updated on that and keep posting up on Instagram.
Yeah, we'll
do.
do.
To follow. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on and introducing us both to yourself and to your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having me and introducing me to your followers, your community.
Yeah.
Everybody go follow the Film Hound on Instagram. The
absolutely.
Film
The
Hound.
Film Hound.
Simple enough. Awesome. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank y'all.